Hello everybody and welcome to the 6th video in our series of videos on the Irish parliamentary tradition in the 19th century. As always, we begin with our learning outcomes, so by the end of this presentation you guys should know what the Kilmainham Treaty was and how it was threatened from taking place. You guys should know 3 ways that Parnell moved focus towards Home Rule, and finally you guys should know how the Home Rule Bill of 1885 was introduced and what happened. So we saw in our last video how Parnell and his colleagues who had been arrested in 1881, of October of 1881, called for the No Rent Manifesto. So while this call was generally ignored by the tenant farmers, it gave the British government the belief that Parnell was crucial in stopping any agrarian or rural agitation. And violent crimes increased significantly when Parnell was imprisoned. So the government wanted Parnell to stop these with his influence. So in May of 1882, the so-called Kilmainham Treaty was worked out between Parnell and Gladstone, where Parnell agreed to not go against the government and to try to use his influence to stop agrarian influence or agitation if there were changes made to the Land Act, which was introduced in 1881, which would give the tenant farmers more security. Now, this Kilmainham Treaty was really the beginning of the end of the land war. However, the treaty was nearly destroyed within a few days. Parnell and his colleagues were released on the 2nd of May, but on the 6th of May, a murder took place that shocked Britain and Ireland and really nearly undermined the whole treaty. So after the release of Parnell, the Chief Secretary of Ireland, W.E. Forster, remember the Chief Secretary now was the British government's representative in Ireland. He resigned in protest against Parnell and his colleagues being released, and he was replaced by a man called Lord Cavendish. Cavendish, however, was brutally murdered in the Phoenix Park on his first day in the country, along with his undersecretary, by members of a secret society called the Invincibles. Now, Parnell was shocked by this and he offered to resign there and then, believing that Ireland would suffer terrible reprisals for this murder. Or these murders. However, Gladstone, he encouraged him not to resign and to try to move forward from the base they had established with the Kilmainham Treaty. Now, with catastrophe averted, Parnell began to chart a new course for Home Rule and the Land League. First of all, he wanted to move away from the land question, which had been the focus for the past 3 years with the land war, and he wanted to move towards the push for Home Rule. Now, to do this, Parnell began to really assert his authority or his leadership over everything. Before he went to jail, he had established a newspaper called the United Irishman under the brilliant journalist William O'Brien, so that he could get his message directly to the people. The next step he took was to assert his control over what remained of the Land League. Now, the Land League had been outlawed after the introduction of the Coercion Bills of 1881, which we saw in the last video. So instead of reviving this thing that had been outlawed, the Land League, he decided to form this new thing called the Irish National League that was going to be under his direct control. Now, the Irish National League put Home Rule as the main objective, and the struggle for land ownership and solving the land question would be second to getting Home Rule. Parnell's third step was that he went about trying to turn the Home Rule party into a unified party following his lead. Remember, it had been this umbrella organisation, but he introduced this thing called a party pledge, whereby anybody who was a member of the party had to pledge to vote with what the majority of the party wanted or to resign. Now, this was a revolutionary concept at the time. This is not how political parties worked at the time. It's how they work now, but it's not how they worked at the time. And it made the Home Rule Party a unified voting bloc. Parnell now had a party machine behind him, and both the Liberal Party and the Conservative or Tories realised that they might need Parnell and the Home Rule Party to get into power. And sure enough, when the 1885 election took place, the Liberals had 86 more seats than the Conservatives, which was the exact number of seats that Parnell and his disciplined Home Rule Party had. Parnell held the balance of power in Westminster. The Conservatives, after a brief flirtation before the election, said that they wouldn't work with Parnell, and this meant it was now down to the Liberals and Gladstone, and the price Parnell's cooperation in Parliament was Home Rule. Gladstone, who had tried to solve the Irish question since 1868, was truly converted to the idea that Home Rule was the answer. And he let this be known, and news of his conversion to Home Rule in a genuine way was known as the Howard and Kite. Now remember, for something to become law in Britain, it has to be passed by a majority in the House of Commons and then passed in the House of Lords. Now, Gladstone introduced the Home Rule Bill in 1886. It was not perfect and it had many flaws, but Parnell was willing to accept it. However, many of Gladstone's colleagues, the Liberals, including prominent members like Joseph Chamberlain, were not willing to accept it. The party split over it, with many voting against it and leaving the party for good and joining the Conservative Party. And this was to start a new 20-year period of domination for the Conservative Party, who now completely renounced ever wanting to introduce Home Rule. And Parnell and his colleagues, they went back to the drawing board on how now to achieve Home Rule after being denied with the first Home Rule Bill. While Parnell didn't live to see the next attempt for the Home Rule Bill to be passed, however, he didn't live, but the next few years of his life were probably the most dramatic of his political career. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. So by now you should know what the Kilmainham Treaty was and how it was threatened by the Phoenix Park murders. Second, you should know 3 ways that Parnell moved focus towards Home Rule and away from the land question. And third, you guys should know how the Home Rule Bill of 1885 was introduced, of 1886 was introduced, and what happened. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys got something good from this video.